everyone. My name is Calvin Claveria. I'm from Rival Technologies and Reach Street Insights. This is Outliers. This is a live event series we've created where we bring in research leaders to talk about some of the hottest topics in the insights world today. Today I have Siddharth from Reach 3, but before I get to him, I just had a couple of housekeeping items that I wanted to share. First and foremost, if you've never been to an Outliers event, this is really like an interactive Q&A style format. So no formal presentations or PowerPoint presentations. The first 20 minutes or so, I will be chatting with Siddharth about the topic today, but the last 10 minutes really are meant for Q&A. So throughout the event, please feel free to share your questions in the chat. If you are not comfortable sharing your questions publicly, you can also DM me as well, and we can go from there. And then the other thing I wanted to quickly mention is that towards the end of this event, I just prepared a short chat survey, just asking for feedback. So if you can take a minute or two to finish that, that would be really appreciated. Okay, so without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Siddharth Gopinath, who is Senior Vice President at Reach 3 Insights. And he is mainly responsible for our financial services team there. So hi, Siddharth.
Hi, Kelvin. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for your time. I know you're really busy. So maybe to start, let's just give everyone a quick intro on you. You know, you've been in the insight space for a while now, but I actually noticed that you started in the CPG space before moving on to the agency side and then eventually working with financial services organizations. So just curious if you could tell us a little bit about that journey and how you eventually found yourself at Reach 3.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. I did start off in CPG marketing, in fact, at a company called General Mills. Probably most of you have heard of them, iconic sort of marketing company with a ton of wonderful brands and products. I learned from some fantastic people over there. And, you know, one of the things that was interesting, when I was actually working there, marketing and market research were really joined at the hip, so to speak. There was very little that we would do as marketers in terms of advertising, in terms of new product development, et cetera, without our market research colleagues. And one time when I was actually brand manager of Chex Mix, we were launching a new product that had tested really well. But when we launched it, it actually didn't do as well as predicted. And, you know, I always was curious as to, you know, is there a better way to figure some of those things out ahead of time? So, you know, years later, I had an opportunity to work at Ipsos in their new product group. So I jumped at that because I felt it would give me a better sense of how we can become better as an industry to help our marketing counterparts and others who are looking for guidance. And then, you know, over the last, you know, several years, the role that technology has played in market research has really exploded the number of opportunities and the capabilities, if you will, you know, quite broadly. And so when I saw the opportunity at Reach 3, you know, I was really intrigued by it because we're really in a position to leverage that technology to do things that, you know, haven't been done before. Both in terms of engaging, you know, respondents as well as the entire sort of market research journey. So in a nutshell, that covers how I got to where I am today.
Great, thanks for that overview. Now, last year, your team at Reach 3 conducted a study on the future of financial services. And really, that's why I wanted to have a chat with you today. Specifically, you looked at it from the perspective of hard-to-reach groups, so Gen Zs, LGBTQ plus audiences, and others. What motivated you and your team to look into this?
Yeah, the great question. You know, we really call the study, you know, a DE&I perspective on the future of financial services. And the reason we use that term is DE&I is obviously a watchword amongst many companies, large and small. It's obviously important for us at Reach 3 as well. But one of the interesting things about the role we can play to help companies with their efforts in that arena is reaching those audiences that fall into those DE&I sort of categories. And a lot of them are harder to reach audiences from a market research standpoint. So when you think about certain ethnic audiences, Blacks, Hispanics, Asian Americans, when you think about certain generational audiences like millennials, like Gen Z, who prefer to communicate via more digital means, when you think about unbanked, underbanked, who are obviously not on the sort of core grid, so to speak. When you think about LGBTQ+, there's a lot of important stakeholders out there that are harder to reach. And so we thought we had a unique role to play as companies were really thinking about their DE&I strategies, and more broadly, from a financial services standpoint, grappling with this whole idea of financial inclusion. How do you get some of these more marginalized sort of members of society to benefit from the financial system? So that's kind of how we came up with the topic. And we identified these different groups, and we felt we could bring some perspective that would be useful for the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, of course, that was very cool about this study is the methodology. So obviously we're market researchers, so we probably should talk about methodology a little bit. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we call it a conversational approach. I mean, I think as researchers, we're always trying to have a conversation with people. We may call them respondents, we may call them consumers, they may be a B2B audience, whoever it is, these folks, we would love to be able to engage in a conversation as a means to really getting at what they're really thinking in an authentic way. But obviously we're not able to do so quite easily at scale, just from a broader research standpoint. So we've come up with this idea called conversational insights, which basically allows us to use a mobile chat-based interface to communicate with our respondents through primarily their mobile devices. Leveraging the digital age that we're in and the fact that virtually everybody has access to a device that allows them to engage in that way. But using a chat-based interface, which is very reminiscent of other platforms that folks are using, it makes it really easy and comfortable for people to answer questions, to share their thoughts. We're able to leverage the power of the mobile phone in terms of the photo, in terms of the video. So by combining all of that and the more sort of informal conversational style, we really think we're able to engage folks in a much deeper way, which then allows us to get to those deeper, richer insights that we're always collectively after. Yeah,
I was particularly impressed by the videos that you guys were able to capture. So I think what we'll do is we'll send, you did a more formal webinar about this a while back. So we'll share that with everyone who registered and of course, everyone who attended today. So one of the things that you did in the study was do an emotional elicitation exercise. And you found that there's actually a lot of optimism among the groups that you talked to about their financial future. Personally, that surprised me. I'm just curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, there's a couple of layers there. First, maybe I should just say a few words for those who may not be familiar with, what emotional elicitation is. Really, it's a projective technique, that's obviously used in the market research industry. We're able to use those kinds of techniques on our platform because we can share images, video, et cetera, that help us to accomplish that. So in this particular case, we had 12 different images, and we were asking folks which image best represents how they feel about their financial future. And actually, truth be told, Kelvin, we kind of saw a little bit of a mixed bag. We did see, some optimism as indicated by the images that folks chose. But we also saw what I would call some concern bordering on pessimism as well. For instance, one of the images that folks chose was a roller coaster. We also saw, a dark tunnel. So I think we saw a little bit more of a balance, between the optimist, so to speak, and the realist or the pessimist. I think this is an ongoing study for us, so it's one that we're going to be repeating in the coming weeks, in fact. And I'm pretty sure that in that sort of set, in that data set, we're probably going to see a little bit more on the pessimistic side, just given the general situation in the world, as well as economically as well. That's my prediction.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I think that totally makes sense. Looking forward to what you find out in the next phase. You also looked at nuances in perceptions at various verticals, including payment providers, banks, insurance, investment management, and fintech. I was personally surprised to see banks get high marks on innovation. What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, it's a great question. To be honest, that was a little bit surprising to us as well. Depending on the kind of survey, you don't always see banks kind of coming to the top. So again, just to set the stage, we were asking these diverse audiences which particular brands within financial services they found to be most innovative. And you're right, Kelvin. Those three brands you mentioned sort of came to the top. I think one of the reasons for that. For the banking dynamic, if you will, is during COVID, a lot of folks were forced to do things maybe differently than they had in the past. There was a lot of online behavior that was necessitated because of health concerns, and so a lot of people started to take advantage of services that they may not have otherwise been aware of. And I think banks did fairly well in terms of how they were perceived because of the COVID factor. In fact, we had asked a question, about some of the different parts of financial services, including banks, and the impact COVID had on people's interaction with banks, and it was definitely, a positive influence on them.
Great. You also looked at it from like an individual brand perspective. And some of the companies that really rose to the top were PayPal, Visa, and Chase. What can other companies learn from these brands when it comes to innovation perception?
Yeah, I think when you look more closely at these brands, I think what probably stands out, and certainly I'm guessing was a factor in their being tapped as leading innovators, is they really consider themselves to be technology brands. When you go to these companies, when you go to their websites, when you see the amount they invest in technology, in terms of R&D centers, et cetera. So I think these three brands do an excellent job of coming up with innovation. They're very adept at pushing it out. So I think that's probably one of the key reasons. Certainly, PayPal has been a leader in its space, since its inception. Many people probably do consider it to be more of a technology company. The technology is central to their offering. And I think when you look at Chase and Visa as well, their mindset is more of a technology company.
Right. Yeah, and it sounds like they've probably made investments in digital transformation way before COVID, and perhaps that really helped them stand out during at the height of the pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. I think part of their technology mindset, is manifested through, how do we make banking or payments easier, faster, more efficient, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, having said that, the financial services industry is a very interesting place to be these days, simply because you do have some big behemoths like the brands you mentioned, but you also have an incredible array of fintech players, many of which are very young companies that are really disrupting the marketplace that the larger, more established brands really had a lock on. So there's while these companies may think of themselves as technology companies, from a broader perspective in financial services, a lot of big established players have these smaller, very innovative players nipping at their heels, which I think is ultimately really good for consumers, because we're seeing a lot of different options out there from multiple set of providers. I think that can only be good for the consumer and for innovation in general.
Right. Yeah, great. And I'll share the link to the webinar recording in the chat here as well. And we'll send it via email as well. So don't worry if you didn't get to it. But yeah, I mean, you have interesting charts kind of showing how different subverticals actually perform, in different groups and things like that. So I think that's very interesting. So we can share that as well. Looking ahead, you found that there will be more digital interactions as opposed to face-to-face, which I think makes a lot of sense. You found that there will be significant shifts in currency. Of course, we can't talk about financial services without mentioning crypto, for example, and also a significant increase in demand for socially responsible products. So that's a lot of changes ahead. How can financial services organizations make sure that they are serving these hard-to-reach groups without alienating their current base? I think that's a fine balance. So just curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's frankly a struggle for certain organizations because they have a strong established base. If you think about some of the innovations, you take a look at buy now, pay later, for instance. An innovation like that is really being led by millennials, by Gen Z, by LGBTQ plus, and they think very differently than say a baby boomer who is used to doing things a certain way. And so you're exactly right. There's this kind of funny dichotomy that organizations need to sort of figure out how to balance, because the more established cohorts still have a lot of money that they need to invest, that they need to spend, but they're not necessarily driving the future. So I think it is a balancing act that can be a little bit precarious. I think options are good. Going back to my earlier point about innovation, I mean, the more options that are out there for consumers, the better that they're going to be able to customize and figure out what works for them. I think also companies need to continue to drive to consumers, what the benefits are of the various tools out there. And I think with concerns about security, with concerns about risk, there's a lot of benefits, convenience. There's a lot of benefits out there that in some cases are well articulated. In some cases, folks are just throwing out a technology without that kind of explanation, and naturally they're not going to stick very well.
Right. Great. Now we are coming to that time where we can open it up for audience Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat here. I can also bring you online if you'd like, if you're interested in doing that. But yeah, Siddharth, are there any other findings from the research study that you'd like to highlight? As I mentioned, there's a lot in the webinar that you actually presented on, but yeah, just curious if there's anything else that you think people should know.
Yeah, I think one other point that was important that certainly I'd like to mention is, when we think about this DE&I harder to reach audience perspective, we think about, financial inclusion, how it'll benefit society. But frankly, there's a big business opportunity as well. We took a look at recent innovations in financial services, and we're looking at, these different sort of subpopulations that we studied. And their role or their readiness to adopt newer innovations is significant compared to what I'll call more established groups like baby boomers from a generational perspective, et cetera. So I think as companies are looking at these audiences, they should look at them not only from a DE&I financial inclusion perspective, but also as a business opportunity, because in many ways they're going to be on the leading edge of adopting technologies and pushing technologies forward. So I think that's really critical.
Right. I'm just curious. I know you looked into the different subverticals as well, like within financial services. Were there any like audiences that were particularly important for different subverticals?
Not I wouldn't call out specific audiences by subvertical, but I would certainly call out specific audiences, by trend, for instance. So if you take a look at, one of the things we took a look at from a future of financial services perspective was, we asked folks, do you think there'll be a traditional bank 10 years from now? So it was very interesting to take a look at how people responded based on the subverticals. So as an example, as you might sort of guess, there were certain audiences that were much more comfortable and did predict that banks would not be around 10 years from now. LGBTQ plus was one that comes to mind. Millennials, Gen Z came to mind as well. So yeah, we definitely see some differences when you think of some of the trend lines, like I just mentioned, as well as when you take a look at some of the, sort of new product opportunities that exist out there. Just to amplify that last point, in terms of the business opportunity, what's interesting is, there's often a big gap between the familiarity people have with a certain innovation and their use of it. And that certainly is, quite pronounced depending on which subgroup you belong to. So if I'm a financial services organization, I'd love to kind of identify, that low-hanging fruit, so to speak, by subgroup, so that I can take a much more targeted and an efficient approach to grow my business.
Right. Yeah. Great. Okay. Awesome. Caroline has a question. Feel free to unmute yourself, Caroline.
Hi, I do. Hi. This is fascinating. Thank you so much. This is great. You spoke earlier about the way that you did it, and it was kind of like an online chat. And I'm just kind of curious about this idea of kind of being able to do it at scale. So how many respondents can you use this kind of methodology comfortably and confidently with?
Yeah, great question. So let me answer that question in a couple of ways. One is, for this particular study that we're talking about, our sample size was about 1,000. So we did 1,000 adults, and obviously we had a lot of these subgroups. So we wanted to make sure we had a specific sample size per subgroup, which laddered up to a fairly large sample size overall. But Caroline, there's really no limit. We're doing studies that are significantly larger than the one I'm referencing, where the sample sizes are several thousand. We don't really have to make sure we're falling within any particular size per se. In fact, we also use our same platform and our same technology for communities, and some of those communities have several thousand members. One of our largest communities actually has in the tens of thousands of members. So yeah, we are able to scale it to basically meet almost any research demand.
And presumably you can use it in any market. There's no limits on what markets you can use in.
Yeah, we're very global. We're a global organization. More broadly than financial services, when you look at our practice across CPG, across tech, retail, healthcare, we are working with some very large companies, many of whom are global in nature. So yeah, global is a big part of what we do. It's very important, obviously, to our clients, and so yeah, we are in what I'll call all major markets, of which there's several. Obviously, our ability to go into a new market, if there's a niche sort of need, as an example, is actually we're very flexible. So it's something we're able to do quite easily.
Great, thank you very much. That was really great. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for your questions.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Caroline. I'm just curious as well, we still have a few more minutes here. Can you offer some best practices in terms of perhaps questionnaire design or research design when speaking or when engaging with these harder to reach groups?
Well, one of the one of the basic sort of premises that we believe is really important is, and I've used this term conversational before, is making sure that we're not, taking people through a test. We feel that while email-based surveys have played an important role from a market research industry perspective for a long time, and they do have a place even today. One of the downsides is, sort of the test-taking mentality that people get into when they see what I'll call a more traditional survey. And the problem is that when people do that, we're always a little bit, uncertain as to how much authenticity are they putting into completing the survey. Are they just sort of, filling in, buttons by rote, very quickly, or are they really putting kind of thought into it? So one of the things, Kelvin, we do is we try to take that test-taking dynamic, if you will, away. We make the our interactions very conversational, very informal, I would say. You'll see emojis, you'll see a language that is relevant to that particular audience, all of which is meant to create an environment that they feel comfortable in. Like I said, the other thing, we use a lot of, and we can do off the same platform, is the ability to combine, the quant that I've spoken, about, as well as the qual, through photo, through video. And we've done sort of research on research that helps us understand that people's willingness to share on video versus in an open-ended text, more traditional sort of way, is significantly higher. Because people are just, the mobile device itself invites a certain mindset that is very, makes it very easy to share video. And frankly, I think a lot of respondents find it easier. It's much easier to talk for, 20 seconds in a video than to have to type out everything.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. That brings us to time. But if there are any last minute questions, Caroline, Kelly, or Delaney, please let us know.
Well, I just want to thank the audience. Thank you for for making it today. Thank you for being a great audience. Appreciate it. Like Kelvin said, we look forward to any reactions or responses you may have when we send you some of the follow-up material he referenced. Thanks for hanging in there today.
Thank you. It's really great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.